Hi, and welcome to another episode of Reclaimed. I'm so excited for today's guest. We have Mallory Penney here, and she is the founder of Leadership Unscripted. And Mallory, in her role there, helps people build confidence, communicate more effectively, and navigate life's inevitable uncertainty with a little more courage and a lot less overthinking. And for more than a decade, she's worked with leaders, teams, and professionals from all walks of life. And she combines coaching, facilitation, and the principles of improvisation to help people get out of their heads and get into action. So, those are some of the topics we're going to talk about today. And really, her work is grounded in the belief that confidence is something that you're not necessarily born with, but it's something that you can build through practice. So, we're going to touch on a lot of fun things today, specifically talk about how this idea of improv shows up in the world of leadership and how we can kind of show up better every day as our authentic selves. So, Mallory, welcome to the podcast. I am thrilled to have you. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Thank you, Lindsay. I've been really looking forward to this as well. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I want to just touch on something I saw recently. You recently got a new certification, I think, right? You announced that you have
I
a new certification to add on to the other work that you've done. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yes. I recently got my PCC, which is a professional certified coach through the International Coaching Federation. So it was a long haul and it feels like a big
Yeah.
deal. So yeah, thank you for acknowledging that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. It is a big deal. That's a tough process to go through. So,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it
You're
was
welcome.
quite a journey, but very rewarding. A lot of growth in that time. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're going to talk about a little bit of growth today. And I know a lot of what you do in terms of your coaching and the leadership development that you help people work through is based on this concept of improv. And you and I were chatting a little bit about, the initial thought I think people have when you say improv is a comedy show or something that they may have seen on TV. So I'd love to hear from you what that actually means. And then tell us a little bit about your background and kind of your role today and what it is you do and how you've infused this concept of, I think what we were talking about is almost like this concept of play and
Mm.
improv into how people can develop themselves as leaders.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I think you're right on. When people think of improv, we tend to think of like whose line is it, or this idea that we've got to be on stage in front of a group, witty, right?
Yeah.
And actually, I'd say like that is like one type of improv, like improv comedy.
Mhm.
But improv is such a more kind of vast world than that, and really the foundational principles of improv that make it look so seamless and easy when people are doing comedy is being present, trusting yourself, trusting the other people that you are engaging with, not having a script, right? So this idea of creating something out of nothing together with a group of people. And so it takes a great deal, like I said, of trust, of confidence to go for it, embracing risk. And I've found principles of improv are actually really helpful and supportive in teamwork, collaboration, better communication, sharing our ideas more boldly and having people accept them. And so that really inspired me to start bringing the world of improv into my other world of leadership development and coaching. And the way that I found improv was back in 2014. A friend told me I should sign up for an improv class. And I had been doing theater for a while growing up. I
Okay.
loved doing theater. And so going to that first class for me was extraordinary because all of a sudden I had full control over being any type of character I wanted to be. And when you're in scripted theater, you show up for an audition, you get cast in a role,
Mhm.
that is the role that you are. And so for me, this expansiveness of possibility was one of the first things about improv that really struck me. And growing up as someone that was always in a larger body, I think the thing about improv that was so powerful was there was no one telling me what role I was going to play. I would
Mm.
often get typecast in like very specific roles, the
Yeah.
old man or the weird aunt. And so
The weird aunt.
the weird aunt
Jeez.
always, and And those are fun roles, but suddenly, like, I got ownership over being anyone I wanted to be. I got to try on all these different characters for size, and I
Yeah.
realized how much in life we are playing different roles, all
Mhm.
the time, and how often the roles that we are playing are kind of put upon us, right? And so this idea of breaking out of that box, taking
Yeah.
ownership of how I showed up, it was very empowering. It was very freeing for me. And there was this big unlock of what improv could really do for people beyond, communicating better and collaborating better on teams, which is really
Mm.
important. But also the power of believing in yourself and going for something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a big thing I do in my work today, bring in those principles. I mean, it's one thing to teach a leadership development training and have frameworks and concepts. It's another to actually practice the muscles needed
Mhm.
to incorporate those frameworks. A big
Yeah.
of improv is listening, actually, less than speaking, and how often we kind of skip over that piece in our communication. So practicing the skill of what does active listening mean? How do I
Mhm.
make sure I'm really picking up on the body language, the intention of what that person is saying, so I can respond accordingly in that moment.
Yeah.
So it's been a training ground for me to feel more confident. I'd say a better collaborator, in life outside of the theater space as well. So
Well,
yeah,
it sounds like it's also just on a personal note, it's given you this personal sense of empowerment, right? And sort of agency over how you show up and how you choose to show up. And rather than, to your point, kind of feeling like you're put in this specific role or box, which I think for a lot of people, that would be very freeing, that I have this agency to choose how I'm going to show up, whether it's at work or somewhere else.
totally. I mean, we're put in so many roles, our whole life, right? It's a
Yeah.
series of boxes, it feels like
Yeah.
sometimes, right? And I think a big part of that is challenging that, right? Breaking free from that. And that takes a great deal of courage.
Hmm.
It takes a great deal of vulnerability, stepping outside of our comfort zone, which is, not always the most comfortable place to be. And really this idea of the space of improv can create a safe space to take risks and to practice stepping outside of the comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I'd say when people first start doing anything like this, they're going to notice those inner critics come out a little bit louder than usual, right? Because you're stepping outside your comfort zone. That is when those inner critics start getting loudest because
Hmm.
their intention is to keep you safe, keep you comfortable. And so we start noticing those voices, like the fear of judgment, the things that we didn't have when we were kids and we were, playing pretend and exploring in that way.
Yeah.
And so it's also just been a great practice in just noticing inner critic is here right now. I'm feeling the fear of judgment right now, right? Being
Hmm.
able to name that and to still make a choice, to still step into the boldness in those moments. So it's been
Yeah.
huge for me in my own personal development.
Yeah, there's so much coming up for me as you're talking, and
Mhm.
even I'm feeling this visceral reaction as you're talking about improv and doing something out of your comfort zone. That inner critic piece is already I'm starting to see how I would be standing in front of people thinking, do I look dumb? Are they gonna think I'm stupid? Am I not funny? Am I like I can already hear the tapes playing in my own head of what would be running through my head if I were starting something like this. And I think breaking through, to your point, like doing it anyway. So to me, that's courage, is just doing it anyway. Everybody's afraid, but you're gonna do it anyways. And I love the piece about identifying that inner critic. I think a large part of leadership is knowing yourself, and you have to really know yourself first before you can effectively lead other people. And the concept of active listening, we've kind of lost that in society as a whole. We're so quick to want to like interject our own opinion, and we listen to respond versus
Mhm.
listening to understand,
You
right?
nailed it.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you find in this process, and I'm curious, when let me back up before I ask that question. When someone comes to you, whether it's an individual or a team or a group, and says, "Hey, we want, coaching, or we want you to help us with a problem." How does this like show up in your process? Like, do you take them somewhere to do this? Is this just in work that you do one on one? Like, how would this actually show up in your coaching process?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so the whole concept of leadership unscripted is really that, you know, great leaders don't rely on scripts, right? It's about those moments where we have to speak off the cuff.
Hmm.
And so that is, we know that's a part of leadership. We know that's a part of team dynamics. And so the way that I tend to bring this in is it's one of several tools that I use as far as, experiential learning to make. I just feel like learning is a lot more sticky when we're actually experiencing it, right?
Hmm. Agree.
And so what I'll do with a group is, start off with some really, really low stakes exercises. And sometimes
Hmm.
I won't even mention the word improv because, as we know, a lot of people have ideas of what that means.
Hmm.
It can already start that inner critic before I'm even in the room with someone.
Yeah.
And so really it's brought up as, hey, do you want to try a little experiment? Let's try this low stakes exercise together. Let's really, really start with a psychologically safe space where people feel like, okay, that felt like a little bit outside my comfort zone, but I'm still okay. Right.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
in team dynamics, it so depends on the goal, right? Are these a group? Is this a team that's intact that needs to have better communication? I might approach that a bit differently than a group of leaders that are needing to give more effective feedback, right?
Yeah.
And improv, these skills from that world are helpful in all of these different areas. And I'd say one-on-one coaching is a bit different. What I find improv can be really helpful with is when someone is feeling really stuck on a
Mm.
decision or they're feeling out of options, right? Improv is naturally a very creative, generative sort of mindset to be in. And so I feel that when I can help people tap into that, suddenly the world seems so much bigger. The possibilities seem so much more possible, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Brings a lot of expansiveness there. So I might bring an exercise in where we're just kind of getting that muscle of thinking on our feet a bit more warmed up. And
Mhm.
then suddenly there's a new idea that emerges for that person.
Okay. Yeah, I love that because when I think about creativity or, unlocking yourself, sometimes you get stuck in the day to day and to me, it's really difficult to be creative or have good problem solving skills or strategic problem solving skills when you're just in this like hamster wheel. And so what you're talking about brings to mind for me even other avenues where like leadership coaching where I've maybe shared with people like what are your skills? What are the things that you go to when you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed? Do you take a walk? Do you take a nap? Do you go play basketball? Like what are those things? And this sounds like almost like another tool in that toolbox for people to pull out and say, I need to unstick myself somehow. I need to pull out this toolbox and use it in moments where maybe I'm stuck or I'm stressed or I'm not really sure how I'm going to show up. So I think that's awesome to just add to that. The other piece that this brings to mind and something that we've talked a little bit about is just the fear that some of this type of stuff can bring to people. And I don't because my podcast is aimed at women, I'm going to bring in a little bit about women too here, which is women do it leadership is high stakes no matter what. But I think when you add the layer of being a female leader in an organization or even someone who's not a female, but maybe, you don't like fit the mold, I guess, of like what you think of as a traditional leader. There's so many other things that come into play outside of just fear of failure, but it's this whole like, how am I showing up? Am I being judged on how I look or my outfit? Or as a female, oftentimes we get these mixed messages of you need to be strong. Oh, but you're too strong. Or be feminine. Oh, but you're not commanding of the room. Or like, it's all these mixed messages. And I'm just curious if you see that show up and how does the exercise of improv or some of the work that you do fight through those barriers that are either real or perceived? Because I think sometimes these are also can be perceived in our own minds just based on experience. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what people are always thinking about us.
Yeah, totally. And that is so real, right? Perceived and also real. I mean, I think they both do very much exist.
Mhm.
And what I think is so powerful about this work is the more we create scenarios where those inner critics are popping their heads out, the more we're noticing and the more we're able to make different choices, right? So it's
Yeah.
building that muscle of like recognizing like, oh gosh, my fear of judgment is really strong right now. Am I wearing the right thing? Am I talking enough? Am I talking too much? Right.
Mhm.
And just to be able to name in that moment, "Oh, I see this critic right now is really loud," is such a helpful first step that
Mhm.
I think of like emotional intelligence, like one of my favorite topics to teach. And the
Mhm.
first piece of it is that self-awareness piece. Can I name
Mhm.
what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling it in these moments?
Yeah.
And when we think about behavior change, right, it takes time, it takes energy, and it all starts with self-awareness. And so
Mhm.
similar to improv, which I'd say is almost like the gym, you're building a muscle, right? So these muscles of being a more active listener, the muscle of being able to think on your feet,
Mhm.
you go to the gym and you work on building muscles through weights. Similarly, you do the same in improv. And I would say same thing is true for this inner critic and building confidence. Like the more we're able to name when it's there and work to make a different choice or step into our boldness anyway in those moments, the
Mhm.
more reps we get, the easier it feels over time, right?
Yeah.
There's no unfortunately, like, no, magic button or anything to just kind of make it happen. I think it is, uh, it's hard work and it's courageous work, to value ourselves in that way, to know that we belong in a room and that we are fierce in the room, right?
Mhm.
But I truly believe that improv has been instrumental for me and stepping into my own confidence, quieting those inner critic voices, challenging norms, right? For the very kind of real limitations that are put upon us,
Mhm.
challenging that a bit, not being so afraid to ask questions and be curious and push back, so yeah, I think that it's a skill that you build over time. It's
Mhm.
definitely not a have it or not sort of a thing. It's
Right.
about being willing to go to the gym, if you will, and work on building those muscles and getting your reps in.
Yeah. I think too, people perceive leadership as either, like you said, you either have it or you don't, or I'm supposed to innately be a leader. And one thing that's kind of surprising to me, I've been in HR for a long time now, and the consistency with which this concept shows up that I have direct reports, therefore I'm a leader. And I
Mhm.
think that then you're a manager, you manage people, but to me, being a leader is something very different.
Mm.
Um, than just having people that report to you, right? And spending time and energy developing that skill set is
Yep.
really important. To your point, you don't just wake up one day and you're an amazing leader and you've got to work on these things. Some of that is like this concept of building confidence that you were talking about, and how the way that you operate with the people that you work with is through this improv work. But you know, this concept of taking risks, and I think you build confidence through risk taking, because then you can see, wow, I took that risk and it was successful, or I didn't, it wasn't successful, but at least I learned something from it. But how does this show up like in environments where maybe there is not a safety net for risk taking, right? So if I think about, there might be organizations, or I don't know, I mean, I'm just thinking even in family dynamics, right? It doesn't even have to be corporate world, like family dynamics, people may not feel that they're in a safe place to take the risk and show up fully authentically as themselves. So
Mhm.
I'm just curious how that shows up in the work that you do, or you have any advice or guidance for someone that's like, I hear you, but this isn't really the place that I can do that.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's a great question. And that's, a very, very real situation for a lot of people. I would first start by asking, digging a little more and saying, okay, is that true or is that a perception, right? That we can't
Yeah.
be ourselves in this moment? And what are the barriers? What's getting in your way from stepping into that? And also, there's a time and place for everything. Some
Hmm.
situations might not be right for more risk taking behaviors, right?
Hmm.
But I would say there's probably a lot of opportunity in our day to day that we don't realize are opportunities to practice this. And it can be in small ways. This does not have to be, life changing big decisions,
Yeah.
but these small behaviors that we step into with taking risks, with being witnessed in our risk taking can be so powerful.
Yeah.
And I'd say, the other thing It's a big topic that comes up when I'm working with leaders that feel like they need to show up a certain way. Maybe they're not someone who's naturally confident or extroverted, and yet there's an expectation in their organization that this is what a leader is.
Hmm.
And they're not feeling authentic when forcing themselves to step into that.
Yeah.
And a way that I love to use improv in this as well is understanding that we naturally show up differently in different situations, right? We do it all the time. And
Yep.
so if we think of that almost as being different characters, different parts of ourself that we are bringing into these different situations, we can then start thinking through, okay, in this moment when I don't feel confident, maybe I've got to step in front of a huge room full of people and really own that room. What
Hmm.
is a character or part of myself that exists that I can step into or kind of put on
Yeah.
to help support me in those moments? So, I actually am working with a client right now who is developing her character of her inner white man, which is,
I
like
love that.
it's great because it's like, what would a white man say in this moment? How would they act, right? And
Yeah.
so helping her get in the mindset of this is still a part of her. She's creating this. This is an inner resource that she has, but it hasn't been well fleshed out before. She's
Yeah.
never really looked at it and created that identity. And so by doing that work and being able to kind of pull that up quickly in moments where she needs it, she can almost step into that character, right?
Yeah.
And so that's been a really powerful
Huh.
with a lot of folks I work with. And it's not you're not going to be that character all the time, right? But what are
Right.
moments where it would be helpful to have a support team in these different situations?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I would love to hear how that goes. That's so like I'm just thinking about that. It's really cool because there's so many instances where you may show up even and think, I don't know how. I mean, I've been
Mhm.
in rooms or I've been in front of people and I've had to guess, like, how should I show up in this moment or how do I think I should based on the circumstances or the people in the room. And I'm not sure, I'm sure I've gotten it wrong quite a few times, but
Mm.
then if you have this other sort of, like you said, character, maybe you can draw from that and it helps just alleviate the pressure of trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know, like if have you developed this alter persona that you can lean on to like, okay, now I'm going to step into the room and I'm so and so and this is how
Yeah.
I need to be for the next 30 minutes. And I was thinking about too how you were saying being able as a leader to kind of be able to think on the fly and speak on the fly. And I do think a lot of what we see at least from the outside is what it sometimes it feels very natural, like, if a leader comes in and they can speak and they're very natural, and those are the ones that I think we gravitate towards because it feels so authentic. But
Mhm.
we know that this is all prepared. Like, we know most people get up and speak and there's a prepared speech or there's something prepared. And I know for me, I feel most confident when I'm prepared. Like when I
Mhm.
know what I'm talking about, I feel like I'm kind of that subject matter expert. It doesn't mean I think I know all the answers, but when I'm not prepared is when I show up very nervous because then, it's like, what's going to happen? So, in terms of preparedness as part of this, because again, I want to just go back to reminding whoever's listening when we're talking about improv, it's about a different concept than what you said, like performance improv or comedy
Right.
improv. But I love this like to me, there's a link between thinking on your feet, being able to sort of command the room, whatever that may be, but then also this preparedness. And I'm
Mhm.
curious if you see a link between those things. And I'm assuming since you're coaching typically leaders, that that's coming through a little bit as people are thinking about how to show up in different circumstances or in different rooms with different people.
Yeah, big time. So there's a couple things coming up for me here.
Yeah.
One is that a topic I teach on a lot is around presence, right? And when I say presence, it's about the skills of reading the room and then
Mhm.
being able to adapt to the room, right? And
Mhm.
that is, once again, these are muscles, these are skills that we build. And once you have done that and you have a sense of how do I tailor my messaging or adapt my approach based on who's actually here and
Mhm.
what they actually care about and need, then I can think through my Rolodex of characters, right? Who's the
Yeah.
best to show up in this moment? Because you might be delivering the same message to different audiences and drastically tailor how you do that.
Yeah.
And As far as the prepared piece, yes, I'm not telling people to, come in totally unprepared. It is very much those moments, though, where things don't go according to plan. How do
Yeah.
you respond in those moments, right? You've got a presentation you're giving, you've worked so hard on your deck, you rely on your deck, that is almost the script. And then suddenly AV is not working, like you don't have any access to your slides. Then what?
Yeah.
You in those
Yeah.
moments.
Yeah.
And I think we've all been in those situations or the Q&A. There's a Q&A after and you don't know what questions you're going to get.
Mhm.
And how do you maintain confidence in those moments, especially when you don't know the answer, right? How do we
Yeah.
say, I don't know, without losing credibility, right? This is a very real thing that I work with a lot of folks on. There's a balance of authenticity and honesty and still holding the room and owning the room in that moment. And it's
Yeah.
definitely doable. But I think that is one of the things that people get most afraid of are those unscripted, those unexpected moments.
Yeah. Well, again, because I think we perceive leadership as I have to have all the answers to all the
Mm,
questions all the time. And actually we don't. And if you've built a good team that reports to you, you should have team members that are expert in areas that you're not as a leader and lean on them. And so, I mean, I've seen it done really well with senior leaders that say, you know what, I don't know the answer. I'm going to flip it over to so and so
yeah.
because they're this is kind of their world. They know the better answer. And there's no less credibility in that leader because he flipped it over to somebody else, right, to respond for him. So I love the idea of like commanding the room, holding the credibility, but also being honest about, I mean, I would much rather a leader say, I don't know, I'll get back to you than to lie to me and make up an answer that's not true, right? So this is all I think really helpful, especially as we consider, how are we showing up? I mean, again, I don't even know if this is not necessarily just applicable to someone who's a people leader. Any one of us, this we're leaders in our day-to-day lives and work, no matter what title we officially have. And so this is really helpful. I know you've talked about improv as a career accelerator, and I'd
Mm.
love to dig a little bit into that. And what do you mean by that? And how have you seen this work help with career growth for people?
Yeah. So when I think of that, there's a couple of kind of concepts that come up for me. One of them is psychological safety, and one of
Mhm.
them is innovation. And these are two key areas that I feel improv plays such a pivotal role. Before I dive into that, though, let me just pause and check. Was that kind of what you were thinking when you're
Yeah,
referring to
yeah.
accelerator?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd love to hear just what your perception is of that and how you see this work kind of helping in that way. So yeah, we're on the same track for sure.
Cool. So yeah, when it comes to this concept of psychological safety, and for those that aren't familiar, Dr. Amy Edmondson is the brilliant researcher that has popularized this idea. And what it means is a group environment where people feel safe to share ideas, ask questions, take risks
Mhm.
without fear of negative consequence, right?
Yeah.
And I almost see that as like the foundation needed for any team, right?
Mhm.
Before you can start exchanging ideas, building anything, feeling safe in that environment. And so teams that have a higher level of psychological safety, there's been a ton of research around this, are the most high performing teams, right? So when I think of a career accelerator, career growth, having that psychological safety is crucial.
Mhm.
And I think often people can understand what it is and why it matters, but it's hard to know how to build it. And I think
Mhm.
that that is where the tools from the world of improvisation can really come in and help people on teams to build a more psychologically safe environment. And a lot of it boils down to being human, right? Our
Mhm.
humanity is our greatest form of currency, actually. And when you're speaking earlier to, this expectation often that leaders are perfect, it's so true. And then if we actually look at our leaders that we've had in the past, the ones that maybe were textbook perfect, to me, were not nearly as impactful as the ones that were human,
Mhm.
right? That
Mhm.
humanity, I think, is so crucial, and that really is important and comes out in this world of psychological safety. So, the more psychologically safe we feel, the more likely we are to share ideas, the more
Mhm.
likely we are to take risks, right? And all of this is needed for us to accelerate, to move from where we are into a place we want to be, right? If we are stagnant, we're not sharing those ideas, asking questions, trying things out, then growth is not going to happen. They really go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say on this too is this idea of innovation. A lot of organizations really like to say we are, very innovative and we're cutting edge, right? The next biggest thing, but creating that environment where people actually feel like they can share ideas without it feeling too competitive, right? Someone
Mhm.
else taking their idea or, really kind of getting into that innovative, expansive sort of mindset. Improvisation is huge for that. And I
Yeah.
think there's one piece that really is the unlock in this environment, which is this concept of improv of yes and. And for folks that are familiar with improv, you may have heard of this concept before. Yes and is one of the foundational principles of improv. And really, what it means, yes does not mean agreement, it means acceptance, acceptance and understanding. The and is then how do I then build upon that to work together? So when you
Uh,
think about innovation, for example, you have to have a yes and sort of mindset uh, to feel like you're actually hearing and accepting what people are laying down and then feeling inspired to build upon that, right?
yeah.
Sometimes, there's a brainstorming session and it's not until you get to the 50th idea that it's really the one that actually is, that you're settling on. But to
Yeah.
get there, you have to have an environment where people feel safe to share ideas. They're not shutting each other down, right? I
Yeah.
think we often move through the world uh, in that no sort of a mindset or the yes but mindset, which is when we think we're saying yes, but then it's followed by a but.
Yeah.
And that is true for group environments, right? This idea of innovation and accelerating things as a team. It's also true on an individual level. How
Yeah.
often am I yes anding myself, right?
Yeah.
Versus saying no to myself or this yes, but, yeah, you
Mhm.
could do that, but maybe you're not the right person, right? Or yes, you could do that, but it feels too risky. So just, I think, a noticing of how often we can get in our own way, right? That mindset is super, super helpful. At least for me, has been huge in my own growth, in my own acceleration in my career is yes
Yeah.
anding myself, yes anding the world around me, seeing
Yeah.
opportunities and going for it.
Yeah. No, I love the concept, and I was just as you were talking, I was thinking about even psychological safety.
Mhm.
I think it's important that leaders understand what that is and what it means and how to not only create it on their teams, but explain it. And I think we have, language is so important and words are so important. And so we've adopted language and words that I don't think everybody really understands what they mean. And so this concept of psychological safety, and I love that you use the yes and, because oftentimes people will feel like I'm not psychologically safe because you didn't accept my idea or we're not using my idea. But it's not about that. I love that you describe it the way you did, because it's about iteration. It's not saying your idea was terrible and you're awful and you're a bad person and therefore we're going to go with this idea. It's about, that's an idea, how do we build on that, or how do we look at something differently and come up with the best idea collectively, because we've been open to this like back and forth feedback. And it's almost, it what it brings to mind for me is like visually I'm seeing, when you do see those comedy improvs, like Whose Line It Is Anyway, or those shows where they feed off of each other, it's kind of that same concept in when you're looking at just innovating, right? It's the, okay, someone said something and then I'm going to build off of that and then I'm going to bring this idea and then I'm going to pull from this over here, my experience, and all of a sudden collectively we've come up with something really cool.
Yes.
Even though it probably was not anyone's original idea to begin with, right? It's probably not, something totally different. So I love the
That's
concept of that.
I mean, that is the big unlock, right? This idea that you just need to build you need to bring a brick. Everyone brings a brick and you are
Yeah.
building the cathedral together, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And being open to that and knowing getting out of that competitive mindset, right? And I think ego can get in the way or, our conditioning can get in the way, but really stepping into that collective mindset of we are here with the same goal, right? How do we
Yeah.
work together, kind of put ego aside for a moment and know that my idea might be the springboard. It might not
Yeah.
be the one that we ultimately land on, but I was part of that process. And that's
Right.
exactly it. In the world of improv, it looks so magical that they have created something out of nothing, and yet we do that all the time without
Mhm.
realizing it. And we can be more intentional about doing that in our day to day, in our work, in our life, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for highlighting that.
Yeah. Okay, I have one more question because it's coming to mind, especially as I think just about being in corporate. And I mean, I've been in
Mhm.
corporate world my whole career. So this concept of not being competitive and putting ego aside is very
Yeah.
counterintuitive to corporate as a whole, because corporate is not lacking ego, and we do reward people for the idea, or we give people opportunity based on an idea or who we perceive gets credit, quote, right,
Mhm.
for something. So I'm curious how, in real life, as you've coached people and they've gone out and tried these things in their everyday world, like what's some of the feedback that you get? Do they feel like it lands and it works? Or is it, I tried it and now I really have to shift and adjust because I also still have to fit within this culture of what I really do. I mean, there again, I'm talking corporate as collective unit, right? Not don't,
Sure.
if someone might be like, well, my company's really great and that's awesome. Your company might be awesome. But collectively, that's not typically what we see. We
Yeah.
see everyone out for themselves. We want to get the accolade, we want to get the promotion, we want to get this. And in order to do that, we need to sort of do these certain things and make sure we're known and we're seen and we're perceived in
Mhm.
this way. And that's a little bit counterintuitive to the concept we were just talking about.
Yeah, it is, and I think it feels like, it feels like a long narrative and belief that we almost have to step on each other to get to
Mhm.
the top, right? Unfortunately, that's conditioning that a lot of us have, and it is still often rewarded in a lot of organizations, a lot of corporations, right?
Yeah.
And then, what I would say in those situations is, do you feel psychologically safe on that team? Right. And,
Mhm.
what I find with the leaders I work with is if they have psychological safety, the mindset has shifted in that organization, right?
Mhm.
The competitive piece, there will be times where, yeah, you've got to go and you've got to put your name on something. But do you have to make that your default behavior every single time? What are
Right.
other opportunities where you could lift other people up, right? Or be
Right.
in more collaborative sort of mindset. So I think it comes down to time and place, maybe noticing little moments where you don't have to be as much in that kind of competitive mindset. And even, can you adjust metrics of success within your performance reviews, right?
Mhm.
Like, what does success actually look like here? Is it part of being on a team that's moving an idea forward versus you being rewarded as an individual? So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's tough, right? In a perfect world, in my perfect world, we would reward collaboration and innovation as a team versus making it so individual.
Yeah.
It's not always the reality. So, yeah, I'd say, practice where you can. Sometimes we still have to get by with going through the motions that we need to, in a corporate environment. But also, what would it be like to challenge that a little bit, to
Mhm.
consider making a different choice and just to notice in those moments like what feels good, what would feel even better, right? I think
Yeah.
that's something that I would encourage people to do.
Yeah. Well, and in some of the other episodes that I've recorded, we talk about being true to your own like value system and
Mm,
really defining for yourself what is success. And I think part of what I'm hearing from you is there's an element of like personal integrity that
yeah.
also goes along with this, right? So if I have to step out of my personal integrity or my value system, then I need to probably reevaluate the environment I'm in or the role I'm playing or something because again, not to like deviate topics, but we hear a lot about stress and burnout. And I think a lot of that is derived from this concept of not honoring your like personal integrity. And I
Yeah.
think when we do honor that and what you're talking about is sort of that concept, it helps us to sort of give us perspective and sort of
Mhm.
stay present and not be as like trying to control and be stressed out about all these things all the time. And then I think, again, this concept, I don't know, this for some reason this is coming to mind. I don't even know if you said it to me once or I'm making this up in my head, but to me this is like the concept of play, where you said at the beginning when you're little and you play and you make up these characters and you sort of make up your fantasy land. And as adults, we've lost this concept of play. And I'm almost like visualizing as you're talking about creating these characters and practicing this, it's almost like going back to play, but as an adult and just trying stuff out and seeing what works and what doesn't and being curious about all of these things versus this like rigid mindset that we've
Yeah.
adopted as adults of I have to do it this way or this way or that way. So I don't know. It's
Right.
it's really fun to me. It sounds really fun. And I love introspective stuff. So I kind of geek out on all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share a quick quote, and I'm not remembering who said it, but someone said that play is the work of childhood.
Yes.
And it's
I've
so
heard
true.
that.
You're learning about the interpersonal dynamics. You're learning about power. You're learning about play and boundaries and
Yes.
collaboration. And I think bringing that back as an adult, we have to go out of our way to seek it and to create it for ourselves. And
Hmm.
it is so valuable. There's so much there that we can learn and lean into. And yeah, I really appreciate you mentioning integrity and values. And a lot of work I do in coaching is so much about values and, really knowing those for yourself, right?
Hmm.
And knowing that when the wind is in your sails and you feel unstoppable, usually you're hitting those values, right? Those values
Yeah.
are being honored. And when something is feeling off in some way, usually it's because a value of yours is either being directly stepped on or is being ignored, right? And it's
Yeah.
such a good gut check to be able to come back to again and again in how we're moving through the world. So yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for bringing that in.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure we leave some time just to share if anyone's listening and they are curious about your work, they
Yeah.
want to maybe get in touch with you, they're excited about what you're doing. What's the best way for people to reach out? And I'll make sure to include all of your contact info, like your LinkedIn and your website link and everything in the show notes. But I want to give you a moment to share with folks, like how can they reach out to you and um, maybe if there's anything you want to share about what you're doing currently in your work.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So my company is called Leadership Unscripted. My website is leadershipunscripted.co, not
Oh,
.com, but .co. And
okay.
we'll put it in the notes.
Yeah.
And yeah, reach out, if you are a leader or someone that when I say leader, I think similar to what Lindsay said, maybe not always in title, but just leadership as an adjective, right? To
Mhm.
describe how we can all step into that leadership. If you want some coaching, reach out for that one on one or with a group. I work with a lot of groups on a range of different skills, whether it's helping team dynamics or helping leaders build different leadership competency skills using the work of improv in all of that. Please do reach out. I always offer a conversation to explore and see, what's coming up for you, so we can see if we're the right fit. And I'd say, beyond the work that I do, challenge yourself to bring a little more play into your life, right? And if ever you've even thought about taking an improv class at like a local improv theater, I would say step outside that comfort zone a little bit someday and try it out. And if you're feeling really nervous about it, I guarantee everyone else in a level one improv class is feeling the same way.
Yeah.
So it's just continuing to step into play, honoring your authenticity, being gentle and kind to yourself when your inner critics are coming out, and just like loving your humanity, your whole self, however you're showing up.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Well, that is a fantastic way to end this episode. Mallory, I'm so grateful that you were willing to join me and spend your time with me. And I am so appreciative of what you're bringing to just the world of leadership and helping people show up in as their best selves. So thank you for doing that. And I know there's a million things we could have talked about today, but this was fantastic. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Really
All
appreciate you
right.
having me.